Okay, you can do it.
Okay, so again, this is our third session, and today we're talking about TAKT planning. And this is, again, these are designed to be high-level executive education because we want to explain the concepts, the principles behind the concepts, and also why you're doing these things. As you're applying these concepts in your projects, you have to reflect on your current situation and then make some adaptations to your own projects. That's a normal thing to adapt these ideas to your projects. Um, and this is a very informal presentation, so we want to take any questions you have. You want to ask a question because we don't have a lot of people here. So you can unmute yourself at any time, ask a question. But simply what I'm doing here is I'm sharing with you examples of tech. And these are example first, I talk about what is tech, some theories behind it, but I really want to share with you examples of how people are currently doing it on projects. And then from there, we're gonna um, explain what TAC is, why do you want to use TAC, and where do you use it, and what's the benefits of TAC, right? So this is, I would say TAC is a more advanced version of Last Planner. So you usually start a project at Last Planner system. So this is kind of what we're seeing here is that when someone asks for lean, they have a various understanding about the capabilities of lean, right? So what an owner or a contractor or an architect may think about lean, they understand different things, right? So last time we covered Last Planner, 5S, visual management, which I recommend you start on every project. But after you get Last Planner running, you start to have some stability in your workflow. My recommendation is to do tech. Your very first project, you may not be able to do tech right away. You might start with Last Planner, and then your second project, you do tech. Today, we're talking about tech, and then we're going to talk about the more advanced things in the next couple of webinars. But it's also very important to understand that you can't do everything here your first time if you're brand new. You may need someone to help you get all of it in. Your first time, I would start on the left side. Don't try to take up too many things, and you can add things on as you go. So, kind of what is tech, right? So here you're going to see an image of tech. This is, it's very complex, has a lot of things, but the word takt is a German word, which means beat. And you're just basically following a rhythm as you're doing construction. The most efficient way of doing construction is to have one trade in one zone at a time. And then, just like musical chairs, as soon as the music stops, everybody moves to the next zone. So we're trying to have stability in terms of understanding where people need to work, when they need to work, and give them the space to do the work. So we're going to use different terminologies like zones, phases, time, and train. We're going to be able to go through all these vocabularies, but there is a standard way of talking about tech that comes from the beat or the train. So with any lean method, I always start with the principles because the principles is kind of where we start building up these ideas, and then we get to applications and methods, right? So what are some principles of tech? First one, you want to have one trade in one zone at one time. The key is that you want to avoid trade stacking and multiple state trades in one space. Any superintendent you talk to that's experienced knows how important it is to give people their space to do the work. But we don't want to give them the whole building. Because we give them the whole building, it'll take forever to finish the building. Number two, we want to create continuous flow of value. So we want to have value being created throughout the project and smoothly created so we can actually understand how long it will take us to finish the project. Number three, if we're able to standardize and create repetition, we enable people to improve their work. If you're doing the same work over and over again, you're going to find different ways to make it better. The fourth one is that you want to balance the workload. So we want to create the areas and zones roughly equal in terms of work. It's never going to be perfectly equal, but you want to make it equal so you allow the people to have similar amount of work every day for them to follow. The fifth one is that we're going to use visual controls. So we want to make it easy for the trades to simply, in one page, look at what's happening so they know where they're going to work, when they're going to work, and so they prepare ahead of time. We want to make this a rhythm and consistency. So as we're going through the project, people know what's going to happen next. So there's no surprises. And because we have the one trade moving in after another trade, there's a sense of handoffs. So you can easily create quality control between one trade and another trade. And they can also talk about each other. They can talk about what are the conditions of satisfaction and what it takes for the work to be completed correctly. As we're doing TAK, because we're moving from one zone to another zone, everybody moves at the same time. We had to create some buffers within the work and also at the end of the work, because if we don't create any buffers, the train is going to collapse, right? So one mistake that people make with TAK is that they try to plan at 100% utilization. And because at 100%, any small hiccups that happens, uh, things kind of get derailed. And then because we have the goal of lean is that we want to have one plan for the entire team, right? So now we allow people to collaborate and communicate, because now we know exactly what we're doing for us to collaborate, and it encourages us to continuously improve, because we generally know what's going on, and we clearly know the timeline of the work. So these are the principles of TAC. Right now I want to ask you some questions to see if this makes sense for you. And this should be very much aligned with lean thinking and very much aligned with the last planner system that we talked about previously. But TAC approaches this through having dedicated zones and dedicated times that you switch between traits. So we can open up for questions if you guys want to have any questions. Betty, any
Hi,
question?
this is
Yeah.
Tech over here. I
Yes.
just have a question afterwards, I think, in terms of how to determine the buffer. Where do we put it? How much do we put in? And I
Yes.
suppose you'll talk about it afterwards, but just want to
Yes,
flag that out.
we'll talk about buffers later,
Great.
towards the end, because buffers is actually the most. Once you have it's very easy to put trades and zones and locations, right?
Yeah.
But the buffer is actually the most advanced topic, because if you do buffers incorrectly, you're gonna have problems. So buffers is very important, very good idea. We'll talk about that. The other thing that we want to talk about is that in addition to buffers, as the team improves, what do you do with that improvement? Because with TAC, if you think about it, when you first start the project and when you end the project, you're going to learn more things. So you're going to have to change zones, change traits. So that switching over is important. But also, a really important question is that a lot of people ask, like, should we do a 5-day TAC, a 3-day TAC, a 2-day TAC, a 1-day TAC? We're going to talk about all those things as well, because if you're good at tech, you can transition from a 5-day to a 3-day to a 2-day to a 1-day, right? Um, in Europe, the Germans and the Finnish people, they like to start with either 3 days or 1-day tech. In the United States, we typically start with 5 days. But what we find out is that when you make your tech time shorter, the product actually progresses faster. And but it's subjected to higher variability of buffers. So you got to be a little more careful as you do that. So those are the considerations that we have. Okay, any other questions? And we'll cover all these things. Betty, you have a question?
Yeah, it seems like when we talked about pull planning, you said that it would be good to, you're not going to obviously pull all the work at once. So are you planning 1 3-day set? Let's just take a 3-day session and then we'll say it's a 5-day session. So then a couple days into it, you're planning your next session and then you're planning your next session. And so then if you're planning sequentially, then I'm going to listen for later when you talk about buffers. But is that the intent?
So if you're looking at a project, right, you're gonna have different tasks at different phases of the project. It's not gonna be one task schedule for the entire project, right? You have different one for
Okay.
tiles, different one for exterior skin, different one for interiors, overheads, and the walls. So you're gonna have different tasks throughout the project. Um, but from having the different tasks in different phases, within that, you're gonna have the trades that are gonna be involved. You're gonna pull plan them together, and you're trying to create now zones of consistent work where the same trades go through the same workflow. Does
But
that make sense?
each tact has one physical area that it's associated with. Yes?
So each zone, each
No?
each zone has one,
One
yeah,
zone.
physical one zone. Yeah, exactly. TAC, when we say TAC, we mean time. So TAC is a
Okay.
combination of zones and time. So when you say TAC time,
Okay.
it's like 1 day or 3 days or 5 days. That's how long
Yeah.
each trade's working in the zone before they move to the next one. So these
Okay.
are considerations that we have to do. So we got to
Okay.
consider sequences of trade, the zones that we're using, and also the time that we switch over, and then the buffers. These are all parameters that we design from the work that we do. So we first start with the work, and then we pull plan to understand what trades need to go through the building to accomplish this. And then we design how big the areas are and how long we give people.
So are you using pull plan together with TAKT?
Yes, you're going to use pull plan together. We're
Okay.
going to explain about that.
Okay.
You're not going to ignore pull plan. You're not going
It's
to
not one
ignore,
or the other. Okay.
yes, you're not going to ignore PPC, and you're not going to ignore the constraint removal look aheads. So everything that we learned previously still applies to TAC. So what we're saying is that we've learned a lot of things, and now we're adding in the component of time and zones to be consistent. So as you just think about it, like TAC is simply last planner system, adding in the time, the zones, equal zones, and adding in the switchover times. So we're just adding more to what we've been doing. So it's an additive process. So nothing that we've done
Okay.
so far, we need to throw away. So everything that we've done so far brings us to this point where we can actually start adding in this concept.
Thank you.
Yeah, because a lot of times people say, do I use TAG? Do I use Scrum? Do I use Last Planner?
Yeah.
The answer is actually use all three, because nothing from one says you don't do something from the other one, because all you do is adding more to it, because you still want to use it. And a major project would have a combination of all three, and you'll see it. And that's kind of the balance, is like, where do I use one versus the other, and how do I transition my communication? But that's a good question. Okay, we see Heather. Hi, Heather, how you doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, it's must be like, is it 8 o'clock for you right now in
It is.
yeah, so glad you can join us. But do you have any questions so far? And otherwise we can kind of go on. I'm happy to, talk about for people, talk with people who are currently applying lean. So any questions so far, Heather?
No. Great.
Okay, so let's continue. And
Explanations.
again, we'll talk about this, because our goal is to get a common shared understanding, right? So no questions are off. And also this room kind of got dark. Okay, so let's continue. So basically the way that I see TAC is that in most of lean, we start from lean manufacturing, right? And lean manufacturing makes sense because it's really easy to visualize manufacturing. You have people that work in fixed workstations, and in manufacturing, the products move through the plant via the assembly line. So it's very easy to understand that, right? So construction is the opposite. Construction, the product is fixed in place. The person that moves is the trades. So the trades move from room to room to do the work. In manufacturing, the people are fixed in place, and the product moves on the assembly line to them. So the same concepts of TAC in manufacturing applies to construction, as long as we understand that humans and teams need to move. The product is steady. So the way that we visualize TAC is that there's few ways of thinking about this, right? One is thinking about the beat, where you have different zones and areas, and after a certain amount of time, everybody moves to the next space, right? Another idea of thinking about this is parade of trades. You have the various trades following each other, and you need to have 5 to 10 trades go through a building, go to a particular room to finish it. Another way of seeing this is that people see as a train. So you have a train and your wagons. So this is why the Germans use the word trains and wagons and right. So you have a train that moves across the building, and it pulls the trades who are in each wagon across, and you switch over from one location to another location in a fixed, steady pace. So these are different ways of visualizing TAC. So at a minimum, you have a series of trades that go through the building to complete the work, and you're breaking into roughly equal zones in order to make sure that the workload is stable and also is equal.
Donna,
So,
Stephanie here. So I just had a
oh,
question for you. Back on the standard work within a TAKT, what kind of documentation or support are people using when that ticket that's probably on the last planner board for what they need to do today and then they going and doing that work. Is there, like, what kind of information are they getting around the conditions of satisfaction, what I actually have to do in that day or that TAKT?
Okay, yeah, we're gonna actually go through that once we have once we get towards the end when we have a full TAKT. Right now, I think we're gonna go to the steps first. I believe your question is gonna be answered towards the end. So, um, firstly, I want to talk about the TAKT process. So this is just an 8-step process for you to create a TAKT plan. The first one is you want to identify your preliminary zones. You break the building into zones. And we're going to talk about the interiors today because it's easier to visualize that. But you can use it for foundations. You can use it for exterior skin. You can use it for different phases of the project, right? The second part is that you can identify the flows and trades. Who's going to be involved? Who's doing the work? Um, you're going to sequence those trades to do a pull planning, to sequence which order you're doing it. Then you're going to level the production rates. And then you build your TAKT plan. Then you have a clear TAKT plan. And from your TAKT plan, you also want to add the buffers and make sure you have enough buffers to identify the uncertainties that you have. But once you have it running, your goal is to learn and improve the TAKT over time, and you're going to adjust, balance, and replan because the plan is just a starting point, right? And as you do the work, you're supposed to get better over time. So if you see here on the top right, this is roughly what a TAKT plan would look like. This is a simplified TAKT plan. So each color is the trade. So and then you break them down into, this is a 5-day TAKT. So you see that each one is representing a week, and then you can see the location. So vertically, you break it by zones, and then across you break it by trades. So the first step is really you take the building, and you just look at how much work there is to do, right? So you can look at it. So what we normally recommend is that we have each trade go in there and take a marker with that color and just mark up what work they're doing. Just mark up the work, right? And then from there, you're going to be able to see a heat map of how much each trade are doing work. And from there, you can actually then start breaking into preliminary zones. The zones don't have to be exactly the same room size because, you build a apartment building or a hotel, it's very easy to create zones because every room is a zone. But when you're building something like a terminal, then you can approximate zones because it's going to be roughly the same amount of work that you have in the zones. So this is preliminary, right? First you say, okay, what kind of zones do we want it to do to make sure that all the trades have roughly equal work. And on some projects, where there's work that's not going to be even, they use the last planner system for that part of the work, right? And the areas that are consistent, they're going to use TAKT. So even on a TAKT project, people roughly use TAKT for 80% to 90% of the project. There's still going to be 10 or 20% that is not going to be even. So you can't really use TAKT because the work is not going to be reliable. So
There was a
yeah.
question in the comments.
Go ahead.
There was a question in the comments about repeat work, or
Mhm.
can you do TAKT on, should it be on just a repeated, like multifamily versus something where it's not? So I think you kind of covered that, but I thought you might add
Yeah,
to that.
well, TAKT in multifamily in the hotels, that's the easiest because it's obvious what the rooms and the zones are, right? So simply when you build like a multifamily, your zones are already given for you, which are the rooms. Now all you got to do is sequence the work and also determine the TAKT time that you turn over. But for things that are not as straightforward, like a hospital, some of the rooms are not exactly the same. You can't use it because you're trying to create approximately the same work for all the trades. But when you're doing something that's like a museum where it's all open, in that situation, it wouldn't make sense to tack it because none of the zones would even correlate to anything. Then you would use just last planner system. So there's a whole art and science to when do you go towards the last planner system side, or when do you go towards the tax side, or when you kind of have a hybrid between those three, right? So this is something that you learn to do. Okay, next question is, yeah, okay. So remember how we talk about pull planning, right? So when you identifying the trades and flow, once you have a preliminary zone, you say, okay, what trades are going through this zone? So this is when you're doing your pull planning session, right? You're sequencing it. And you're also experimenting, saying, okay, what does the plan look like if I do a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5 day TAK? So to me, you should start with just the scenarios first before you even lock down to a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day TAK, because what happens is that your customers have an expectation when they're going to finish the project. And if you do a 5 day TAK, you may not be able to finish it on time. So that might require you 3 days. But also, as you get to the 1 day or 2 day TAK, um, uncertainties would affect you a lot more. So not all teams are able and willing to do 1 day or 2 day TAK right away, right? So there's a balance. So what I would say is you create the different cases and scenarios and see what your projects look like in the different scenarios, and then from there saying that, okay, the shorter the TAK duration, the faster your project moves. So if you move from a 5 day TAK to a 3 day TAK, I believe you save like 20%, and from a 3 to a 1, you save an additional like 20%. So there is a mathematical difference between a 1 day and a 5 day TAK of like 50% of the duration, right? And you can see this as you calculate it. But the question is, what do you want to do? So I recommend that you start with all 5 and just like see the scenarios before you jump into one, because a lot of teams automatically jump into a 5 day TAK or a 3 day TAK without considering the scenarios. So this is where you use pool planning. So it's the same process that we learned in pool planning applies, because you're simply saying, okay, I'm taking all my zones and I'm just looking at one of the rooms for now. And if we want to finish this one room, who needs to be through the room, and what's the sequence and the trades that need to be involved there, just as a exercise to understand what it takes to finish one room. So it's like planning in one of the zones. Um, when you look at the zone, right, the work is never going to be level, because some trades would say, okay, I need 2 people, I need 3 people, I need whatever. It's not going to be level, but you're trying to create the zones in a way that you get roughly the same. And again, you don't even know what people tell you is true until you do it. So a lot of times, if you have a big enough project, you may create a mock-up where you create like a mock-up of the room, and you have each of the trades go through it as a test of the productivity numbers, because this would give you better information. So a bigger project, you would do a first run study in order to test this. And in terms of production rates, what we found out is that we never want to put 100% utilization, because 100% utilization is very dangerous. In lean and also in project production and management, we found out the goal is on average 60 to 80% utilization, and you want to leave 20% capacity. So you want to have capacity within the work itself, but also at the end of the project. So that's where your buffers come from, right? Because your goal with TAK is to create reliable work, and you have reliability of when you're going to finish, rather than full labor utilization. Because on a normal project, if you get an average project, right, that's not using lean at all, utilization is roughly 40 to 50% anyways. So here we're saying we're happy with 60 to 80%. So we're doing better than the average, even though you can see that there's still extra capacity. And then, so this is kind of how you build your TAK, right? So once you have the data, once you validate that your TAK works within the time frame of the project, you use one color per trade. So you put one color per trade. So you see here, this is horizontally is the dates, right? So you can see horizontal is the dates. Vertically is the zone. So you can call it TAK zone, TAK area, whatever you want to call it. And as you can see, as you move across, the different trades are going through the building, and then they're moving into the next part of the building. So the colors here, like see on top here, you see yellow. So you see 1, 2, the ones right here. That means the first week, trade number 1 is working in the area A. The second week, the trade number 1 moves to area B, while trade number 2 moves to area A. So as you go through the project, you can see which trade is working in which area at any time. So it's super clear and super transparent. So buffers, right? Buffers are really important. So you can see this picture here. This is from a finished project right here. As you can see, there's various different TAK, and with TAK is very important to indicate where you are on the timeline. So there's a little red line right here that tells them where they are. because they're reading the line, they can see which tray is working in each zone. So usually with buffers, what you want to do is you add buffers. So we have 3 buffers, right? Your buffers is the capacity of the work itself. So you're not going to put the work at 100% capacity. You put in work at 60 to 80% capacity. You're also putting buffers in the middle. So usually in projects in the United States, we use the weekends and we use the holidays as our natural buffers in the middle. And then we also added buffers towards the end because there's always something that would go wrong. You may missing equipment. You may have a shortage of materials that would cause you to derail your TAKT. So we always add a 10% buffer at the end, and we also add buffers in between. So the buffer is really designed for you to have the team solve problems without blaming each other, because sometimes things just happen, right? So a general rule of thumb is that you want about 10% buffers at the end, and you want about 10% buffers within the TAKT plan, in addition to the capacity buffer. Because the real goal here is to ensure high quality and high reliability of work. We're not here to try to like squeeze people to get them to work at 100% utilization, because there's no such thing as 100% utilization, because all there's variability in people's ability to do work. And we're giving them the extra capacity because as they improve the extra capacity, then we are able to replan and to get that back. Okay, there's a question here. Okay. If this is a finished project, why is the vertical line on the 3rd floor page? Oh, this is not a finished project. This is the current this is the project from they finished by now, but this is the line here indicates where they were on the project at that time. But that's a good one. Okay, so learning and improving, right? Because as we're having consistent zones and trades that go through it, we're having people do the work multiple times. So what we do is once you have the TAKT going and you have stability in your work, you can actually use cameras and you can actually study the work. So this is a video right here. This is a picture from the DPR Turner project in UHS Temecula Valley. This is like 20 years ago, right? When they're doing the hospital project in Southern California. And what the team found out is that once they created consistent areas and zones, they can actually have the teams capture their work and identify waste. And what they find out is that there's a lot more waste as you start looking for it. But we really can't get down to the looking for waste until we have that stability and reliability. So yeah, so we watched a little bit of video right here because the goal of TAKT is that we're trying to move closer to one piece production because we're giving people smaller zones to work in as opposed to giving the entire floor, entire building, right? If you give someone an entire floor and building, it'll take forever. So this is a short video we watched about the difference between single piece flow and batch flowing, right? So watch this. So as you can see, if you have a smaller batch size, things move faster. This is why the smaller the zones and the shorter your text tech time, the faster you finish the project. But obviously, it's still a design decision about what you want to do with the project. So not having a shorter tech duration is not always the right move. So yeah. So TAKT is really mathematical, right? Because once you know the zones, the rates, the trades, you can simply calculate how long it'll take you to finish the project, which is good because then you have, as long as you don't mess up and as long as you can follow your steady, plan, you have a very reliable way of finishing the project on time. But also in between, as you change the parameters like the trades, the zones, how many people you have working per trade, you can also influence the work itself, right? So a more advanced topic is, this is not for today, but I wanted to bring it up, is that oftentimes when we have the projects running with TAKT and with Last Planner, we also use project production management, which is from the PPI, and we're looking at other parts that would influence the reliability of projects. And then the PPI also uses like IoT to track deliveries, to track supply chain, to track things that feed into the TAKT plan, right? So we still have to work on the product delivery itself, but then the supply chain becomes more important as the product gets bigger and bigger. So this is a very important topic, but it's not for today, but just to keep your mind understanding that planning on projects and working on the site itself is one thing, but then we have to feed that ability through the supply chain. So what we found out with PPI is that you don't want 100% utilization, because 100% utilization is like having a freeway. If all the cars are fully on the freeway, nothing really moves. And what we find out is that really you want about 60 to 80% utilization, because you want to have good flow, not 100% utilization, because that nobody wants to be stuck in traffic. So what we find out is that, okay, at 68% capacity, right, you're avoiding overburden. You give workers some time to think about and learn from their work. So roughly on an 8-hour shift, you're looking at like 5 to 6 hours for direct labor, and there's additional time. As the trades get more efficient, you can change the variables of TAKT time and crew sizes. So typically what we do is we start with a TAKT, let's say a 3-day TAKT. As the team gets better, we may transition them into a 2-day TAKT and then a 1-day TAKT. So that's kind of a natural way of absorbing all the positive gains in efficiencies, because they're working on the same zones over and over. So learning and improve. So basically you think about this, you're simply putting a GoPro in the locations where the trades are doing work, and you're watching the trades go through it, and you're identifying waste, right? So we have this video from my friend Aleski, and this one is not embeddable. So let me pull it up here. So Aleski is from Finland, and the Finns are one of the earliest people who started doing TAKT. And he started TAKT actually not in construction. He started TAKT in ship and cabin refurbishment. So kind of interesting. And then he moved in construction, but he saw that there was a bigger need for it in construction projects. But we're gonna watch an example of how they renovated a ship. And a ship is large enough to where it's almost like a multifamily project, right? So let's kind of watch this. Share. So here they're renovating a ship, right? So you can see that they have to quickly turn over the ship, because every data is not working. It costs them cost the company money. So look at this carefully. So this is actually interesting data, right? So they have 880 cabins, and they do a production of 60 to 870 cabins a day, right? So they have 2 trains. So you have 2 different parallel crews working together, and their TAKT time is between 18 and 22 minutes. So they're trying to have the manpower to turn over the project quickly. So this is not like a 1-day or 2-day or 3-day or 5-day TAKT. We're looking at minutes here, right? So this is kind of what they do in cabin refurbishment. And in manufacturing, TAKT times are down to the minute or the second, because as the car moves across the assembly line, you're able to time it down. But in construction, we don't have that quite the same level of reliability, so we can't get down to the minutes or seconds, but we go by the hours and days. So here, let's go see example. So this is a shipyard, and they have the warehouse, and they're trying to create the warehouse in a way that would feed the work on the TAKT. So remember, you're trying to plan the work, but you also have to then do your supply chain to feed the work. So it's going to happen. Okay, so because you're trying to keep the 20 minutes or so takt time, a lot of things have to be prepared, prefabricated ahead of time. And you gotta also create a very clear production schedule for the day, because if you're off, it's gonna waste a lot of time and money. So they're prepping all the material for the different tack trains, because they have to be in and out quickly. So everything has to be prepared. Okay, so now we're seeing the wagons, right? So they're using the word wagon as the crane. So the first one is demolition. So again, everything happens in 22 minutes or so. And taping, scanning. So yeah, that's the video from Alfred Alexsky, and he's the guy in the end doing the QA that you saw there. But this should give you a better sense about what TAKT looks like, right? Let me just go back to share my screen. Do you see my screen? Let me stop this. Let me do a new share. So that's the general idea. As you can see, really shipbuilding is the same as construction. And you're trying to create consistent rooms to do your TAKT. Let's continue here. So again, as you get the same locations, what you're seeing there is that he's filming from the perspective of one room and seeing the different trades go through the room, right? If we just choose one location and we put a camera there and we look at everybody does work throughout the building, we're gonna have them study the work. We can have a project engineer look at the work, and we can identify waste. Once you start looking for waste, you'll find out there's a lot of waste. So typically, you're gonna find 60 to 80% waste, and that's okay. That's a good thing, because once you have the waste, then you can categorize them into 3 categories, right? Value added, non-value added, but necessary, and also waste. Then you eliminate the waste and you reduce the non-value added but necessary. And this is how you improve your projects over time. But when we have that consistency, we can then do these studies to look at productivity and look at ways to improve it. So that's why I would say that if you have a lower skill labor, you're going to benefit more from having this process. So this is an example from waste walks, right? This is from AECon, and Tech already saw some examples of this before. But AECon has been able to save hundreds of millions of dollars from waste walks, because even though it's a very simple process, as you get your projects to reliably have a consistent production plan, you have the opportunity to start to find these wastes. And this is where the Kaizen really happens. So we don't teach Kaizen first. We teach it after you have stable last planner and stable TAKT, because from there, your Kaizen doesn't actually interfere with the work. It makes it better. Otherwise, what we see with people is that they do random Kaizens to where it may look like it's improving, but it's not improving. So we want to first create that consistent framework first. And then there are new products that allow us to use AI for identifying waste, right? This is one product. It's called Kaizen.
An engineer needs a video recording of one cycle of an assembly process to get started with the analysis.
This startup
This video may
is
be
currently
recorded with an
working
ordinary
in
smartphone camera and
manufacturing right now,
uploaded to the
but
software.
there is application
The
that's
tool
in
makes it
construction.
incredibly simple to get AI feedback on any assembly process. All a user needs to do is to specify the start and end of a cycle in the video, followed by the work region, usual location of the operator, and the number of steps they want to break the cycle into. Our unsupervised video segmentation technology automatically divides the cycle into a sequence of meaningful steps, saving the user from extensive annotation effort usually required for time studies. From the left-hand side, the user can select any step and near the top right corner of the screen, replay just that step. The user can optionally provide the name of individual steps as well as modify the steps identified by the AI. The AI then asks suggestive yes-no questions corresponding to every detected step. The AI tabulates the final improvement recommendations by taking this user feedback into account. On the results page, the system estimates that the current cycle time of 114 seconds can be reduced by 43 seconds, which will save more than $21,000 just in annual worker wages on this station. The system identifies the motion on several steps as being haphazard. It also suggests that the user figure out a way of removing step 9 altogether. It further recommends swapping the order of steps 2 and 3. Under station layout suggestions, the AI divides the work surface into ergonomic reach zones and measures the activity taking place in each of these zones. It establishes that a significant portion of the work is taking place in regions J, K, and L, and suggests moving this activity to other regions of the work surface. Our AI estimates that implementing this change will reduce cycle time by more than 7 seconds. The system also makes improvement suggestions at the level of individual steps while simultaneously estimating the ROI of these changes. It further shows a spaghetti diagram of worker movement at the level of individual steps and identifies whether the motion is economical and well planned or not. When the motion is haphazard, it calculates the potential value in appropriately planning it. The system also generates the standard work chart and other kinds of graphs describing the fine breakdown of the process. All of these analytics can be exported in Excel and other formats to be compatible with existing Kaizen procedures within an organization. At the end, users can record notes on the effectiveness of these suggestions, which in turn helps.
So what you're seeing here is that once you have a very good understanding about the work that's happening, you have actual footage of the work. You can either have people look at the work carefully to find opportunities for improvement. You can also train AI to see the work for hazards, safety, efficiency, and recommendations. So there's all kinds of benefits once you get your TAKT running, right? So there's a lot. So TAKT is like the start of it, right? But we get more efficiency once you have the system running, because there's now different things you can do. So typically when you start a project, that's not doing TAKT or lean, right? You're in a bottom left quadrant where you're low flow efficiency and low resource efficiency. Really what we want to do is first have better flow and then have better utilization. So that's kind of the general direction that we're heading towards in improving our work. Okay, so kind of why TAKT, right? So this goes with our previous talks about having one plan for the entire project. Now you have a transparent plan for the entire project. Everybody knows what it is. By having repetitive work, you're promoting learning and continuous improvement, because people now, when they make an improvement on the zone of work, they can do that same improvement 50 times, as opposed to having unequal zones where you learn once and then you kind of move on. So the problem with learning on projects is that if the work is not consistent, you can't really carry your learning from one part of the project to another part of the project, right? But when we have these reliable zones and workflow, once you finish 10% of your work, you can reliably predict when you're going to finish your project, which is actually great, right? So nothing else gives you this prediction power. But because the work zones are consistent and the same, you now have the means for the trades to communicate with each other, right? So the predecessor trade and the trade that comes afterwards talks about their conditions of satisfaction and about QA issues with each other on every time that you move from zone to zone. And you simplify communication because only the trades before and the trades after need to talk to each other. And this allows people to first quality control the work before they start doing their own work. And since you have a zone for every trade at any time, you don't have trade stacking. There's not two trades working in the same area. No one's blaming each other for low productivity. And because you know how you're going to do the work consistently, this makes logistics and supply chain more straightforward, because now you know exactly what quantities you need to bring it in to which locations for who. So it simplifies the logistics and supply chain of your project. So some benefits of TAKT, you're going to have higher productivity and less waste, more reliable schedules. It's going to be safer, and you're going to have better customer satisfaction because the quality that you're seeing is the quality you're going to get. So you can identify quality issues very early. When and where can you use TAKT, right? So TAKT can be used in various parts of the project. You can use it for coordinating design and your BIM and your clash detection. So there's a project in UCSF that's using TAKT to coordinate the clashes per room. You can use it for piles and foundation work. You can use it for steel erection and exterior cladding. You can use it for your interiors, overheads, and your finishes. So there's lots of opportunities to use TAKT on a project. What should you focus on to be successful? I focus on the handoffs, because when one trade enters and one trade leaves, that's really where the communication about what it takes to deliver quality between the trades are. You want to make sure you maintain flow and have good communication between people, right? You want to have very good visual display of information so that everybody understands what's going on. One plan And from that plan, you're able to work together to identify problems, constraints, and remove the constraints beforehand. From there, you have opportunities for learning improvement, and buffers and contingency is where you try to set it up to not have your TAKT be derailed. So everything that we learned in last planner system, everything that we learned in the very first webinar still applies for TAKT, but now we have an extra layer of understanding about what we can do. So a lot of projects use TAKT and last planner system together. So this is a project at Boat in Oakland. So here you can see there's a timeline. The yellow triangles, those are the key milestones. And you see the little red ribbon, that's the current date, and they just slide it across. And you can see that there's different phases. So they break the project into the different, like 8 or 9 phases. And within each phase, they have various different levels of TAKT planning. So you're not going to have one TAKT for the entire project. You're going to break it strategically by phases. So advanced topics not covered here. So we did talk about buffers and uncertainties. We want to make sure we have buffers. Oh, wait, I have a question. Let me take the questions here. Okay, I have to drop off my next appointment. Thank you so much. Okay, well, thank you, Tech, for joining us. Okay, so buffers and uncertainty. We also want to talk about flow efficiency versus resource efficiency, because a lot of times people that are not familiar with TAKT, they try to say, okay, how do I get people to work at 100% utilization? That's not the goal. The goal is to create reliable flow and give people the buffers in order for them to improve. And we want to make sure that we move as closely we can to one-piece flow. One-piece flow in construction is basically 1-day TAKT. So in the beginning, we may have a batch of 3-day TAKT or 5-day TAKT, but our goal is always to move towards 1-day TAKT. We want to understand the conditions of satisfaction and what it takes to finish work from one trade to another trade. But as you do the work, you're going to be able to add in things like poka-yoke, which is mistake proofing, to reduce the likelihood of mistakes on the work. If you're doing something for the first time, you may create a prototype to do a first run study just to understand what it takes to do it and to see if your data about how long it takes each trade to go through it makes sense or not, right? But as you do it more, it becomes more advanced. Then you take the TAKT plan that's happening on the project itself, and you're using operational science to pull the supply chain to make sure the supply chain supports the TAKT. And then some things that you're going to prefab, you make sure that the on-site TAKT aligns with your prefab facility. So we're connecting the project with the prefab with the supply chain. And when you do all those things, you're going to have, a better reliability of your project. And most projects don't just use TAKT or Last Planner or Scrum, they use all three. And there's a fine balance about how to use the 3 different systems of production planning and control, right? They all work together. They work in some situations, you use one more than the other, but it's a fine art of how to do this. And really, you only can understand this by doing it. Okay, so a lot of times, when we're teaching this TAKT online, we're going to the presentation, but as you're learning more and more of this, there is a hands-on simulation you can use. So this is my friend Spencer out of Mortensen, and he has a simulation that he teaches his team. And typically what you do is you first learn the executive education, then you do a 1-day simulation to really understand the benefits of TAKT. So I'm going to watch this video for you guys. And then they also have, Mortensen does a lot of wind and data centers, and they're working on some nuclear projects as well. So they have specifically a tax simulation for the wind group. So you can create a very particular tax simulation. So this is here, they're building turbines. So again, you can, these are all 3D printed, so they can create like very custom training for their particular work that they're doing. So a lot of times people say, oh, I'm working on a solar installation, a wind farm. The work is repetitive, work is easy.
Oh yeah.
There's no improvements.
So here's the setup for tomorrow. Trevor's writing down all of the tasks for this build, for the take on the simulation for wind. So here is a finished product, how it looks on the site, how it's all put together. And the first thing is taking this that's 3 feet away from each individual site where all the towers are going to be built, the 10 of them, and you take it and you set it up like this, and then you start building based on what things have to be built. And it doesn't have to be in this order. We were just kind of saying that yes, indeed it does fit in the blue tape, right? And then you take all of the pieces and you build them up on the job site per person like this. And the cool thing, there's a couple cool things that we came up with. There's actual marks on here to show production versus initial QC and then owner QC basically. And then the owner QC has to be all of these marks, and they have to be like this. So that's one way to visually inspect. But then there's also a pad right here to connect the wiring of the actual unit, which is kind of a fun little thing. But that's the idea for the production that requires cranes. There's a number of cranes that are available, and they can only do certain tasks of work. And it also takes time to mob and demob, and that's why they're an actual stopwatch, is when you get on the job site, you have to go through the mobilization time, and then you can do your work. And then when you go to the next job site, you have to start your time to do that work, and you can't go until that thing beeps. So that's one way to identify the mobilization and the different types of cranes. These are RTs, the rough terrain cranes, right? And then these are the bigger 2 cranes. One can do top out, one can do the prep work, right? So that's kind of the idea between all of the different pieces. Trevor had a good idea with actually having some of the more complex things that you have to put together, because an actual battery and setup goes inside of this actual generator that is on this toy. And so this is a nacelle prep kit, and so that is coming kitted. So that's kind of saying one part, but those have to all go together when you actually prep this piece on the job site, because that is really how it happens in real life. So there's some fun things here, like doing the actual zip ties on the thing, so that is an actual consumable. But that's a really cool way to take the actual work for wind and apply it to a simulation to start talking about, well, how would we actually go through and do this? And what are some of those aha moments of like, how can we look at our work and improve the work? So hopefully you can see this idea and think about, for your type of work, is there something that we could put together for your specific, whether it's finding something that's kind of pre-made and tailoring it to yours, or maybe even 3D printing all of the parts that you need for a typical build of whatever type of project or whatever that you're working on. So hopefully this is a cool idea that you can see. We'll take some video, and Trevor will be able to show you when we do this actual in real life.
MCC. What MCC and get it? Yeah,
Your choice.
I think we made a 24-hour break.
Uh-oh. Well, I gotta go, Mark.
Yeah, I know. The string's not. There you go. Yeah, I ain't never seen baseball pass. I'll go over there for you. Yeah. They were good. Ready to ride?
So yeah, so that gives you a good understanding about TAK, and you can play games. There are a few TAK experts. So you saw the video from Spencer, you saw it from Oleski. So these are the top four, I would say, TAK experts in the world. So you have Janos from Germany, you have Adam Franson from DPR in San Diego. So these are the four people that are in the TAK game the longest. And typically you want to do a simulation. You can send one of these four to do it with you guys. But the idea is that there are people that specialize in TAK, right? So this is like a specialty within lean construction. So this is why we say that one person doesn't know everything. So when you need to do TAK or when you're trying to do these simulations, there are people that have those games ready and then the ability to train people with hands-on. So yeah, there's different, TAK is on the easier side. So you have many ways of deploying TAK, but there are people that can help you with TAK as well. So I'm happy to make that introduction if you have a project that needs people, right? So, but we still want you to come to visit a project because to me, like nothing really beats seeing all this in person and for yourself. And especially when the project gets to a certain size, it makes more sense to have people come and see the big room in person and talk to the team and see the tech plan, right? So you have to see it in action because again, in the presentation, everything looks so simple. Everything looks so straightforward. But in the project is very chaotic. Like, how do you actually do this when things are happening? You have piles, you have cranes, you have things happening, right? So we have to see it in the natural environment. And then from there, you have a better perspective. But here, I'm just trying to give you a very high level overview of what it takes to do TAK and what a well-done TAK plan looks like. But there's, a lot of things you're going to only learn from doing it. And you have to talk to the people who are running it every day, saying, okay, what are you learning? How are you improving? Everything that we see here is aligned to what the field is, but I think that is very authentic for the people to see it in action in the field and then combine it with the training here for them to really see kind of where it fits in their projects. Okay, but with TAK, there's a lot of software that helps you do TAK. These are just some of them. A lot of people, use one of these softwares to help them with a TAK plan, and which is, very good way of doing it. You could also use Excel, but typically this is kind of what people use on projects. So these are just some examples. Again, everything we said here about the zones and areas and also the timeline is the same, consistent across TAK plans. In the middle, bottom right here, this is created in Excel. So you can create in Excel, you can use software. Typically teams start with either Excel or software, and it's a very good way of visualizing it with the project team and for people to know colors. And when you're using TAK on your projects, a lot of people label the zones and they have like blue tape around the zones so people know which one is which zone. And in between the zones, they have to label who's working there and also what's the conditions of satisfaction when they're finished. So that makes it super easy to quality control. So again, with a project, we're not looking at just TAK, just last planner. We're looking at the entire thing, right? We want to optimize for the entire piece because at the end of the day, we're working on the same project. And unless you optimize for the entire project, you're going to get unevenness, right? So we're saying that TAK is very important. It helps us do a lot of things, but it's not just about TAK. It's about the entire project. And TAK is one part of that to help us achieve the goal. So yeah, this is the end of the third session. Happy to take questions. Oh, also, we're doing the Last Planner System conference in April. So this is the slide with the information here. You can join virtually, you join in person. We recommend in person because we have Glenn Ballard, Paulo, we have James Pease, all the people who are involved in Lean for the last 20, 30 years are presenting. So we're trying to bring the best practitioners in the world. And it's going to be in the Bay Area near the airport. So very easy to get in and out. If you can join us, that'd be great. But we see that lean construction isn't static. It's not something that was invented like 20 years ago and then hasn't changed, right? We're seeing it as a dynamic. People are applying on projects, the learning, the sharing. People are visiting projects. They're seeing the best ideas. They're iterating on their own projects. So we see this as a dynamic process where the community is openly sharing their best ideas. And then you learn from each other by visiting each other's projects or by listening to people's successes and failures. So we highly encourage you to be part of the community to learn about these things. But yeah, that's the end of the presentation. Happy to take questions. And if there's anything that I did not cover, let me know and we can go through that. So I think the first question for me is, was the presentation clear for you in that when you go through the presentation, do you have a better sense about TAC, or is there any part that you would like me to clarify for you now, and also I'll clarify in the future when I give this presentation?
By question?
Well, I think we can get two people. Betty, want to go first, and then I have Stephanie next.
I was just going to say, I thought it was well presented, and I assume that there are varying levels of expertise in the room. I'm probably the lower level of expertise for this topic. And I just appreciate that you answered the question, even though, maybe some other people knew what I asked, but thank you for that, because I got more out of it that way.
Okay, and was
Appreciate
it now does the whole process look kind of clear for you, understanding what it looks like of the output and also the steps of how to put this together?
Yeah, because honestly, I started reading through the presentation because you were kind enough to give us your slides beforehand, and
Mhm.
I didn't get it the way I understand it now after the presentation. So I feel like I still have a lot to learn, but at least now I understand that it's part of the process. It's an add-on to other things as you learn, and I can see how it would be very, very valuable, in
Mm-hmm.
particular for some kinds of projects.
Yes, and also you have an example at the DPR project at Sutter Santa Clara, right? So whenever you have the time
Yes.
to go out to the Bay Area, I would
Yep.
recommend going walk the site, talk to John Eberhardt, have him show you around. The team is currently doing a 3-day TAC. I was there last week, so I saw that they're doing a 3-day TAC. They may transition to a 1-day TAC. 6 months ago, they were at a 5-day TAC. So you can see that there's a transition. And
Wow.
then you clearly see their TAC plan, and you can see their daily huddles. So they're applying all these things because we have a really good owner there, and also the team is pretty experienced. So if you wanted to see an example, whenever you go up to NorCal, Redwood City, stop by, spend the afternoon at the project, and you'll be able to see these things in action. So that'll be easier for you to visualize once you walk the site.
Thank you.
Okay, and Stephanie, you have a question?
No, I think you've covered it really well, Joan. I just want to say thank you for having the session and for using all the different videos and things that you did, which really brought it to life and helped sort of see it applied after you've spoken about it. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Heather, do you have any questions or any comments?
Yes.
Oh,
I
Carrie,
don't
why you go first?
Yes. Are there any rules for coloring the tag? Because we have some color yellow or green or blue. So I have question, are there any rules for coloring the tag?
The answer is yes and no. So to me, the colors don't matter because as long as you know that you once I give you a color, it's your color. It doesn't matter. But the Germans, like they're really picky about these things. They have a color wheel. They have a color wheel they follow. So they basically take all the trades and they create a color wheel, and then you're with that in that trade, that's your color, right? So there are people in Germany and in Finland where they do this a long time that they now have standardization for color for every trade. Because what they do is that the reason why they standardize is that they have so many projects that are doing tax. Some companies have like dozens or 100 projects at a time, right? So they had to quickly go to any project and be able to one-on-one compare the colors and the work that's happening. So if you do this a lot, you will come to a standardization. And the guys at Intac, which is TAKT, the one in the top right here, they have literature because these are PhDs that work on TAC in Germany, and they have a color wheel that they use for the colors.
And I have another question. How to combine the LBS and tab blending? So I see the slide, the combination, the milestone, the LBS and the tab blending.
Oh, you're combining the learning or you're combining the practice?
Yes. Yeah. This
So let's look at this, right? Firstly, what do you have from the last planner system here, right? You're gonna have the milestones, which is your the ribbons in yellow, right? So the diamonds in yellow are your milestones. So that's not going to change, right? Within the milestones, you have different phases of work. Sometimes in the phases of work, you would create a TAK plan. Sometimes you would create a last planner system plan. But at the end of the day, you're creating that kind of like with you when you zoom in, there's a consistent type of work for that project or for that phase of the project. So that's how you do it, right? So TAK is not going to be the entire project. TAK is going to be within the phase. So you look at last planner system, right? You have master planning, which has your milestones. Then you have phase planning, which is between two phases, right? So TAK planning is really about going from within the phase and the work structuring within that phase. So you're breaking down to zones and weeks and days within that particular phase. So that's kind of be how you do it.
Mm-hmm. And I see you have the slide to show, so we can use the AI to improve the task planning.
Yep.
So I have a question. We have another way to improve the task planning or only AI?
No, you can use humans, but we're not improving the task planning, right? You plan the work, when you record the work and you see how people are working. So this product right here called Kaizen Copilot, they use this in manufacturing. They haven't built it for construction yet, but I'm seeing examples that we're going to quickly move towards being able to use the same AI to improve your project. But even before AI, this is 20 years ago, right? People were just like value stream mapping the work and videotaping the work to identify the waste. So if you have AI, use AI. You don't have AI, you can use humans. Either way, as long as you have the videotape of the work and you can see how the work, because when you're doing the work as a worker, you're not aware of your waste. If you're aware of the waste, you wouldn't make it. You're simply not aware of what's happening day to day, right? So you're just recording the work and identifying, watching the clip and saying, okay, if I take the entire work clip of like 20 minutes, what part of it is value adding, what part is waste. And simply by labeling green and red and yellow, that's the start. And then I say, if it's red, how do I eliminate that redness? And how do I talk to the teams about what is waste so that they can improve that? So a lot of the waste occurs because people are simply not aware of the waste being there. But once they know that there's waste, it's a different conversation. But we can't get to the waste reduction until we have stability of the workflow.
Oh, thank you. And I have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
We see if the top planning has some many advantages. So I have a question. There are any disadvantages of top planning?
Oh, disadvantages? Well, disadvantages is that you have to be disciplined. If you're not disciplined, all your zones and trades, they just crash into each other and you fall off. So when you have a train, right?
Or maybe have the question here, no.
Well, the advantages and disadvantages of the track is the same one, right? So if you have a train that pulls, people along, right? What happens when one of the carts fail? Well, everyone fails, right? That's a disadvantage of TAK, but that's also the advantage because if you fail, you want to fail early, you want to fail late. You better fail early. So with TAK, you're going to fail, you fail within the first 5% of the project. You're going to know right away. If you don't use TAK, you may think you're successful, but you're not successful because you're hiding the failure because the failure doesn't have any consequences for you today, but your consequences will come 5 years from now. So by the time it hits, right, then people, say it's not their fault because they weren't here 5 years ago. So with TAK, if you're gonna fail, you're gonna see it right away. If when the trades finish their 1 day or 3 day TAK and they need to change over and someone's not doing the work, not able to finish on time, or there's a QA issue, you're going to see it right away. So with lean, always saying is that if we're failing, we want to fail early and want to fail fast and want to see it. And it has to be visual that we're failing. So seeing the waste and the mistakes is not a bad thing. Because in the past, they've always existed. You just were not aware that they existed or they were invisible for you. So that's the disadvantage of TAK. And also, not everybody wants it to be the same level of transparency. And also, if you think about TAK, right? If you have the trades all with lump sum contracts where they don't communicate and they don't have a big room, they don't collaborate, you can see why you can't get TAK, you can't get the entire trades to collaborate. Because if one of the wagons don't want to follow the process, you got nothing. So that's why there
Hmm.
has to be that sort of alignment incentives. There has to be good communication. If you're a general contractor, you got to train people early and you got to tell people that this is how you do work. Because normally a trade has random resource allocation. So they take a person, in one day they might have 5 people on a job site. The next day they have 3 people. The next day they have one person because they're shuffling people from project to project, right? And that's a natural part of the smaller trades that are doing this because they're trying to optimize for labor utilization because labor utilization for them is how to make money, right? But labor utilization is different from how an owner makes money. An owner makes money when the project is delivered faster. So an owner would be willing to have you be less productive as a utilization and have their buildings done faster. So there's a misalignment in incentives between the trades and how the field crews. Because if you're HVAC, you want to keep people busy all the time because that's how you make money. But you're an owner, you want to finish the project faster. So now there's a misalignment in incentives here. So with TAKT, we can clearly identify a middle ground between those two extremes and then negotiate a way that works for everybody. So that's the advantage and disadvantage of TAKT.
So
Heather,
interesting.
yes. Yeah, Heather, you want to add some questions?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, when you're doing tech, often it takes less manpower and you're done sooner. So there is an advantage to trades by they don't have to have as many people and they're on the project for a shorter amount of duration. But if you can
Mhm.
show them that, it's not directly intuitive initially. Um,
Yes. And also they don't
uh,
believe you. They don't believe you. You've never seen it
nope.
before.
Yeah.
They
Uh,
think it's going to take longer because most of the building is empty. That's what you have to teach a superintendent is that yes, most of the building is going to be empty, but you're going to move faster.
um, love the presentation. Love the way you cover the topics and very clear. Um, I don't necessarily have any questions. I feel like you kind of really answered all of them, or at least they're still sinking in. One thing I will share is a video that I like to show that I feel like really embodies what tact is, where you've got this rhythm, this repeat work, and everybody knows exactly where they need to be because as soon as they leave their spot, somebody is coming. Google the Texas A&M band, and they have one performance, one that they do,
Mm-hmm.
and they are crossing each other, and it's astounding to see. You would think they would trip all over each other and fall because they
Mm-hmm.
do it so much, they practice it. And that to me is what tact really embodies. It's this you've found that everybody knows exactly where they need to be and when and who they're handing off to, and you're following this train. So that's a great kind of visual. And the way I like to share or explain tact, if you've seen the movie Moneyball and how Moneyball took statistics and math and changed the game of baseball because they changed the formula for how s- to be successful as a team and to how to get more wins using math. And that is exactly what TAKT is doing for construction. And it will completely forever change our industry if we can be willing to try a new thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I have a comment from Mingit. Want to see an example from an ongoing project? Yeah, I think that what we could do is so I have relationships with all the people that are doing TAK, and some of these people are currently working on 50, 100 projects at a time. They're responsible for TAK for their entire company or lots of projects, right? So what makes more sense is that this is kind of the introduction training, but we can definitely do a follow-up with Spencer or Aleski, and they can show you a lot of examples, and then they will show you variations because they have the 50 to 100 projects ongoing that gives you more variations. So I would not consider myself the TAK expert. I'm really good at TVD. Within TAK, I turn over to people that do it every day. So happy to do that call separately and then we can kind of deep dive into all the examples, and you can get more questions answered. Okay, yeah, we can do it. You can do it. Well, how about this? We finish the 6 series, and in the 7th one, I'll bring in one of the TAKT experts to like deep dive into TAKT. We can do that later. We can do that as a 7th one. That's definitely doable. Okay, next question. I have Hung. Hung, you want to ask a question?
No, just I wanted to say thank you, Zoeng, for giving a super clear and great material for this group, and especially all the Vietnamese folk as well here on the call. I just wanted to share that when I was in Vietnam, I learned that in Vietnam they use a line of balance scheduling, which is not exactly TAKT, but it's like a very close to like a TAKT planning, in which they could balance out the flow of work and identify the best optimum duration for a floor or for a certain level, no area of the floor as well. So if any company or project that they already been using the line of balance method, when they transfer to TAKT, it's going to be much easier for them because they already like a thing that way already.
Yeah, so there's a few ways that are similar to TAKT, but not quite, right? So there's line of balance is one of them. Another way of thinking about this is location-based scheduling, where people schedule based on locations. It's very similar to TAKT, but it's not the same because TAKT has the same handoff times between the trades, right? So that consistent TAKT time and then consistent zones and areas creates a much more reliable and tighter schedule. So even with line and balance or location-based planning, you might actually plan in there some waste. So that's why we kind of go towards teaching last planner and TAKT. Once people don't know about TAKT, they would gravitate towards line and balance or location-based planning because it is a logical next step, but the final evolution would be TAKT.
Totally agree.
Okay, so I have here from Heather says, good clarification. It's okay to start with a 5-day TAKT and work towards a 3-day and 1-day, start small gradually. So yeah, if it's your first time doing TAKT, the easiest thing to do is do a 5-day TAKT. That's like the first thing, right? Because you got your weekends or your buffers. A 3-day TAKT is an intermediate level, and 1-day TAKT is very hard. Because 1-day TAKT, if you kind of mess up, it's going to cause a lot of problems. So I would not go to 1-day TAKT right away. I would start with 5 days, and then you work yourself up. Okay, anyone else here have questions? Happy to take more questions. But what we're trying to do here is provide very foundational knowledge that makes it simple, so like everybody can understand and be on the same page. Obviously, when you actually apply on the project, it's a little bit messier. So we're trying to teach you the process without all that mess. And when you deal with stakeholders and you deal with the projects and you deal with tools and equipment where it gets much messier, you at least know what the ideal state is like for you to kind of go towards, right? So again, this is teaching you what the ideal TAKT scenario will look like. Will you ever get the ideal situation? No. You have all kinds of people with all kinds of knowledge, all kinds of resistance, right? But we want to teach you what it looks like and then work day to day to get towards there. And most teams that do TAKT, I guarantee you 100%, most teams that do TAKT do not. So these are things that people do not do, right? Waste walks, most teams that do TAKT do not even get to this level where they actually start looking at waste. For whatever reason, they do TAKT and they let the trades do the work, but they never look at the work, right? So they never get to waste walks. A lot of team that does TAKT, they don't have a consistent like integration with last planner system. So here you kind of see some examples, and these are current examples. This is a project happening now, 2025, right? Currently happening. So, and what we're seeing is that with lean construction, every project is learning and improving over time. So what we're simply doing with education here is that we have an understanding about what each method is, and then I collect the data from actual projects to kind of reconstruct ideas that you can use on your projects. But again, this is education, but we still want you to see it, and it's hard for you to fully understand everything, all the nuances until you actually see the big room, see the project yourself. And again, if you want to see one, we can make it happen. So we have a lot of projects in the Bay Area that's willing to show you and show people. I think we probably need about like 5 to 10 people minimum at a time, but you can walk to a big room, walk to site, see all these things happening because you have to see it to know what you want. And once you want to do it, it's still a struggle to do it, right? But at least you know what you're targeting, and you also know why the things that you're targeting is going to give you the outcomes that you want. Okay, so I have a question here.
Can I have?
Okay, so I have a question from Heather. Let me take Heather first before I get to you. Okay, when you're
No, it's
speaking
fine.
on, oh, okay,
That's
oh
just
yeah,
a FYI for you later. Just for later.
oh yeah. There's a mathematical formula. Actually, I have it from Genos.
Yeah.
So there's a formula
Yep.
you can calculate. But you're right. Maybe we should add in that calculation. But yeah.
It's a good visual.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're right. There is a calculation, exact calculation that you can see the durations decreasing. Okay. So next question.
I'm sorry. So this is Tien. I'm a professor in Vietnam. So,
Mm-hmm.
so we have been trying to utilize BIM like 10 years ago. So we in Vietnam we are like not a contractor, but we are doing like project management consultants, PMC, and I've been trying really hard to convince the contractors applying Lean. However, we still really struggle with them to get them engaged in doing that. And TARG is something really advanced from Lean. Thank you for that. But my question is that what is your recommendation to get the contractor here in Vietnam to like applying some basic in Lean or engaging applying Lean in their project? You have any recommendation or something?
Yeah, so what I've seen is that the contractors self wanting to apply Lean, it's very rare. Most people just, as long as they're making money, they don't want to change. So
Yeah.
it's not really where you would drive it, right? The
Yeah.
driver of Lean has always been the owner. So you're a construction management company, you want to educate the owner and make the owner know what these lean methods are. And make the owner will say, oh, these methods make sense. I'm going to invest in a big room. I want my teams to do last planner. I want them to do TAK. Only if the owners are wanting to do these things and requiring these skills does the contractor do it. So I rarely see a contractor that does these things on their own. And it's not sustainable to push it on a contractor side, convincing them to do BIM, convincing them to do VDC, last planner, TAK. It's very hard. The better way to do it is actually you work as a owner's representative or a construction management firm, helping the owner and allowing them to understand what these things mean. And when the owner, the person who's paying for the project, is asking for it, that's when things happen. And once an owner kind of gets the benefits of last planner or TAK or whatever was shown here, they're not going to go back. Nobody ever goes the other way back. So, but it's really about exposing the right person. Contractors at the end of the day have to apply this on their projects, but the person who drives this and sustains this is actually just the owner.
Okay, got it. So I mean, yeah, the owner, if they want to do that, then they need to spend some money on having people who understand how to do it and invest in like a big room, as you said, and also
Yeah, but also it's the biggest owner, the owner that builds the biggest project, because the other driver of lean is complexity and scale and scope, right? So you're building something small, you can do anything you want, it'll be done eventually, right? But you build something very big like a hospital or a nuclear plant or a data center, if you don't do things well, you're going to see consequences quickly because every day you're behind could be hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars, right? So there is a economic reason for the more important savvy owners to do these things. So I would always go with the owner, and I would find the owners that have the biggest and most complex projects. And they're usually the ones that listen the most because they know how expensive it is for a day of delays.
And if you're like wanting to try something on your project, I would start with daily huddles. teams that I was working with, like when COVID hit, all the other tools, you know, were hard to do because of all the changes in the regulations. Every team kept doing daily huddles because they saw the value. And if you can get people to talk together and work together, they're going to see the value and they're going to be more open to trying more quote lean tools. Because it's a tool is a tool. It's how are you using that tool and the intent.
Yeah,
That's a
we're doing daily huddle here, and also the pool planning, a bit of LPS, but it's, I mean, it's just a minimum of how we can do
Yeah.
without power. Yeah.
Yeah, this is, you know, you do what you can do, but also once an owner, because in the beginning, anybody can do Last Planner 5S visual management. That's like a simple beginning steps, right? But once you start to get some value and show value to the contractors, to the owners, and really have that relationship and talk about it, then they're more incentivized to do the more advanced things. And later on, when we talk about IPD, Progressive Design Build, TVD, it becomes much more complex, and you start to see that in order to get the full value of lean, you have to change a lot of things that people do in the industry. But they have to understand why they're doing it and be willing to invest in it and be willing to take that jump, right? That transition. So that's not necessarily easy for everybody. That's why we want to show them examples. Because if they don't see another project, they can't just believe a presentation. So we want to, you know, give them enough data to where they have the confidence that they know where they're heading towards.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else has questions? We're happy to take questions. Again, this is a discussion. So now that we kind of seen this, really want to talk about anything you want to talk about.
I have how to say regarding the tech planner. Do you think that outside of the US in the Asia Pacific, is there any construction project have implemented? I mean that going to the US for the local company will be a big challenge regarding the visa and also the financial. But it around Southeast Asia or Asia, maybe it's more easier for us. Do you have some recommendation?
So in Asia, well, what I'm seeing right now in Indonesia and in Singapore and in Japan, it's just starting to learn and apply these concepts. So you're looking at right now, I don't have any advanced projects that you can see. Even in India, they're roughly in the same areas as you, right? They're at Last Planner, they're at 5S Visual Management. I don't think that they've really gone to a really stable and strong TAKT yet. For TAKT, the areas that you would want to go to would be Finland, Germany, and United States in selected parts, right? And it's not the blanketed state of everybody. We haven't gotten there to fully export it to where there's an easy example for you to see. But if you wait like a year or two, I'm pretty sure some of these organizations that are doing this training will apply this, and we'll have actual examples in Asia, right? But it's a matter of time. But right now, if you want to have a good, because the way I learn is that you could go to a place and get a mediocre example, right? Or you go to a place that has a great example. I would rather learn from a great example than a mediocre example, because a mediocre example is like 2 steps ahead of you. A great example is like 20 steps ahead of you. So to me, like I would rather learn from a 20-step ahead of me. So we are going to produce more content, videos, storytelling, examples, so you can see examples of this for yourself. So we have a media team here that my media guy follows me around the entire year. So Cristobal's been following me around a year with various projects. So we're gonna take all these little lessons, and he's telling the story visually, video storytelling, in a way that is neutral and that's not based on construction, because he doesn't know he's never worked in construction, right? He's a videographer, right? But we're gonna be able to tell the story and really be able to get people the examples and the confidence that this is the right thing to do. So just like, you know, we're gonna try to create this more for you guys, but it's gonna take some time, because I understand there's constraints with traveling and also money and visas. But if you just wait towards this year, next year, we'll have a lot more examples for you.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have a question? If we don't have, we can take like probably 2 more questions and then we can call the day. But thanks for joining us. Hope you guys learned something. Again, this is you have the presentations, you can watch it and go through the slides as many times as you want. So the way that I make this is that I organize it by steps. So it's easy for you to, when you're running a project, you just kind of go step by step. Because a lot of times you just need clear steps to do these things, right? But the idea here is we want to show you the concept, show you the steps, what it takes, what it looks like, give you some confidence that this is possible. Obviously, we can't cover everything in this time. And then also, my tech guys, these 4, you can add them on LinkedIn, write them a message, talk to them. They're happy to show you what they're doing. You need them to do training or simulation, they can help you, or they can point you to who else can help you locally, or they can even point you to where you can get these little kits for you to make your own games, right? So there's a lot of to me the industry is very wide. There's a lot of people that need to learn how to do these things, and there's a lot of benefits to teaching people. So we're trying to scale out the teaching and allow as many people to understand these things as we can, because no matter how many people we teach, there will always be more people that want to learn. So but you should add these 4 to your LinkedIn, follow them, and any questions that you have with TAKT, we can talk a different time or talk to one of these guys. Okay, any questions? Just like we'll take 1 or 2. Okay, I have one from Tian. Go ahead.
I'm just saying thank you. This is really interesting for today. Appreciate your time.
Yeah,
I think it's quite late your time right now, right?
Yeah, it's like 7:30, 7:40. It's fine.
Okay.
But as you can see, it's not hard to do. Once you see it all in one place, it's very simple and it makes sense.
Yep.
I think that
Okay.
people already sign up. Maybe it's our time for them. So thank you very much, Yuan, for today. We will post on the same YouTube channel.
Okay.
Previous one. Yeah.
Okay, and also one more thing. Next month we have to move it 1 month because next month is a conference that we're hosting. So we have to move it like 1 month after that. Does it make sense?
Okay. You move first, and then I announce to the.
No. So basically, we have the next one. The next one is going to be on the I believe it's going to be the 19th of April, but we have the last time system conference that day. So we would need to move it 1 month after. So instead of April, we move it to May, and then the May to June. So basically, we push everything back 1 month. And I think that's
so we will skip 1 month, right?
Yeah, we skip the next month and then we'll go back. But again, it'll give you more time to reflect because we did 3. So now you have 3 to learn from. And also the 4th one is actually more difficult. So you need to kind of study that more because last TBD is the hardest. And it includes a lot of things. So you would have to spend more time studying it, reading, going through the slides. But my recommendation is always like read the slides first, study it first. So when you come, all your questions will be answered. The slides don't cover everything because the slides are just visual aids because we still have to talk about it and go through it. But it helps you know what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night.
We'll see you in 2 months, okay?
Okay, 2 months. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Zoe. Thanks, everyone.